to hear where you're from, what's going on with that. But as we go through here, Karen and I have worked together in professional development, faculty development. We've done a lot of work with designing courses. And so we'll talk about that more as we go through here. We're authors of a book that several of us have written together and on course design. And so we're really going to be talking today about this idea of inclusivity in a unique and different way. One, the first part, to be able to engage all of our students, but we're also going to be taking a look at really what it is that we want to do. So at first, let's take a look at inclusivity as we design learning for all types of students. And so getting into this right off the bat, we're going to take a look at both for faculty and instructional designers, you need to consider many factors, and we're designing effective and engaging courses for our learners. So one of the things that's often overlooked is a student's orientation to others and the world around them. So basically, are they introverted or are they extroverted? And the first part of our talk today is really going to be looking at designing courses for both types of learners as we go through here. So some of you going to be just a little foundational work that we're going to do at the very beginning here. And that is Carl Jung, and some of you familiar with his work. Many of you probably taken the Myers-Briggs type of personality indicator, you know, kind of where you fell on that whole thing. But in plain language, Jung's spelling of extroverts tend to gain energy by interacting with others. And while introverts tend to gain energy by reflecting internally. And according to Jung, of course, there's no such thing as a pure introvert or extrovert. So the first thing I'd like to have you do in the chat is share the answer to this question is, do you think that you are more of an introvert or an extrovert? And what characteristics do you possess that makes you lean that way? So feel free to share. If you're comfortable with that, feel free to share in the chat, telling us a little bit about yourself that way. And we'll see if Karen's mic is working and she's watching the chat as we go through here, and we'll share our responses. Those of you just entering, we're in the chat right now sharing answers to both of these questions here. Karen, is your mic working?
I think so. We've got a introvert because being around a lot of people drains her and she needs time alone to refresh.
Right.
We got another introvert who has fear and uncomfortable in things like breakout rooms.
And maybe adding things in chat. But anyway, we understand that too.
Another introvert, I need a lot of time to get back my energy after socializing. Okay, an extrovert, speak before I think, get energy from others. Introvert, talking can take a lot of energy, that's true. The older I get, the less tolerant I am of small talk. So I try to be extroverted for work, even though I think I'm really an introvert.
Okay.
And an introvert, but not around people I know. Extrovert, sometimes frequently by necessity.
All right, these are great responses. These are responses we hear quite a bit of the time as we work with faculty on this topic. And so let's just quickly again review of building that foundation so everyone's on the same page on this. The characteristics of introverts, again, you gain energy from being with others, something some of you just shared with us, some of you extroverts. Their thinking actually feeds from the idea of others, and it becomes a synergy that builds that way, and they really enjoy that. They may begin one direction and end up going another whole direction based on the conversations and the feedback they're getting from others. Introverts often prefer to keep more to themselves. So being asked to contribute their ideas on the spot may provide a lot of stress rather than energizing them. So even in a session like this, where we're going to start to ask those of you, and more of you identified as introverts, we're going to ask you to share that information. We hope we can do that in a way that feels safe. And sometimes online, some of these spontaneous responses in chat will give us a chance to keep that a little bit less of a public display at that point, because you're behind the screen a little bit. All right, so here's the challenge. Introverted faculty and instructional designers will tend to design courses with more of a reflective and internalized approach. Extroverted faculty and designers will tend to capitalize on student interaction. They don't mean to favor one or the other, but they unconsciously gravitate to that type of learning. So when you think of yourself as a designer, begin to start to think about whether or not you tend to design more as an introvert or more as an extrovert. So again, we're going to ask you to share something in chat. What experiences have you had as either an introvert or an extrovert that have made you feel like one is more preferred than the other? Do you think introverts or extroverts are more preferred in education than the other?
We got when professors assume that introverts are not engaged, teachers are seen and as extroverts, and IDs are seen as introverts. I want to say extroverts, but it depends on the field. Okay. Extroverts are typically seen as better students because they share and engage and talk more. So instructors favor those that answer questions or volunteer. Introverts more preferred, take more time to think and listen.
So far, we have some great insights and perspectives that you've seen from your experience. Karen, anything else that we have?
It can depend on the environment. Instructors maybe do not make space for engaging introverts, for example, through chat rooms. Extroverts are not afraid to ask questions. This is great that you've all thought about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, these are your observations and they're fantastic because you're nailing it, right, as to the things that we're talking about. If you haven't seen this, there's a YouTube video, there's a TED Talk actually. Deirdre Faye Jackson pointed out that academics who demonstrate introverted characteristics, that is, are somehow less valued than their extroverted colleagues. So when you think of tenure and promotion, when you think about people who are getting awards and being recognized on your campus, do they tend to be more in the extroverted or introverted sort of characteristics that they're demonstrating as they go through here? And one of the things that we really take a look at is that introverted characteristics somehow really are less valued. And as we really study this a little bit more, Karen and I have been talking about this for the last couple of years. And as we've been doing that, we've dug deeper and there's more information that's come out that we think is really fascinating here. So imagine if we only had one type. We obviously would miss the talents of the other. So extroverts will often rush forward to complete work. They want to check boxes. Introverts may examine the work in a deeper dig. So intentionally considering how to guide students to move from extroversion to introversion or vice versa, as both modes actually have benefits for the students, for your class, and the participation which takes place. It could be everything from forming teams to doing individual work to being able to identify ways that students can individualize their learning and being able to share that information. So again, think about intentionally designing the course so that both will have opportunities. You may notice that extroverts enjoy talking in front of the class, or even now that we've moved more to online sessions, especially during the pandemic, They enjoy talking during the Zoom sessions. They'll be the ones that will answer your questions by unmuting themselves, or they'll be some of the first people to dive into the chat and being able to share information that way. They like to contribute verbally in discussion posts and be able to do more of that. And they also love working in groups, as you probably have identified. Introverts may appear to hold back. So as some of you just stated, we don't always see the evidence of their thinking or hear the evidence of their thinking right off the bat. Somehow they need some time to think about things first, and they are likely to silently observe in a teamwork situation and then being able to share things later. One of the things that online chats have really done is, as you've had time to think about something and then you can post your response, it's a really nice way for introverts to do that. It also makes extroverts think through their answers quite a bit more than just simply answering quickly and getting to what they think is going to be the fast response and being able to move on. So here's some myths about introverts as we've done some deeper digging. Introverts are shy. You may have heard that. Some may be, but not all of them are, of course. Introverts are unfriendly. And again, sometimes people look at that and they think that, well, they don't maybe tend to verbalize in larger groups, or you don't see large groups of friends with them. They enjoy their own company. And so we think of them as sort of being unfriendly sorts. Introverts can't be leaders. And some people think that an extroverted personality equals leadership. And yet at the same time, introverts actually have skills to make them effective leaders by listening to others' ideas, staying focused on long-term goals, and they seem less threatening, so people may accept them in their roles of being a leader. It's hard to get to know introverts. They prefer deeper friendships with a handful of people, so they may not warm to everyone who likes small talk. And I know one of you mentioned that before, especially as you get older, less small talk, more substantial conversation is better. And so real friends get to know them very well, but they don't have a lot of surface relationships. In academia, we find that there's a majority of college professors are introverts, and they are a distinct minority in the general population. So a lot of people who go into teaching at the college level are actually introverted people. A disproportionately high percentage of introverts in academia makes sense given the work that we do. A lot of the times we're researching, we're spending time digging deep at things, we're being able to share that knowledge through writing, through the papers we present at conferences, things like that. So it takes a lot of mind work that's going on. And then once we're comfortable with that and we know that we have what we want to have, we share that information with others. And so consequently, the teaching part of it is what we sometimes think of as college professors, standing in front of a class, being an orator. At the same time, it's a lot of the work that goes on beyond that that really starts to take a look at what's going to be different and what makes them a little bit more of an introverted population. So why introverts make exceptional teachers? When you think about these things, deep listening skills, reflective, thoughtful practice, appreciation for individuality, the value of deep work. Some of you introverts may be recognizing these, sort of that calm and steady influence. You don't tend to react quickly or overreact. You tend to take things in and dwell on them a little bit first. And then the encouragement of independent learning. These are all great traits for exceptional teaching, because you're going to get students to be able to bring out more of their own personality and their own individual learning from that standpoint. So one of your goals in designing courses for significant learning should be considering the transformation of skill sets of extroverts and introverts into becoming ambiverts, teaching them to learn from one another and to move along the spectrum as the situation changes. And that requires a different approach, a different kind of course design. So, characteristics of ambiverts. Let's understand this person that is able to move back and forth. One, they know when to push, they know when to pull back. They know when to speak up, and they know when to listen. They adapt to whatever the situation is going to require. They learn from one another to switch strategies to complete work. And if you think about your role in the workplace, once you've graduated, once you've got your teaching job, you've had to be able to wear different hats. You've had to be able to move back and forth as a professor in your institution, as an instructor in your institution, to be able to wear that variety of hats, to be able to do a variety of tasks. They're typically more emotionally stable and resilient, and they think, act, and behave in a more consistent manner. So most of us are ambiverts, and I was interested that, I don't know if we got anyone that did share that they felt that they were an ambivert right off the bat, but for the most part, the more experience we get, we learn to be stronger ambiverts, because we learn when you need to shift back and forth, when you need to be introverted, when you need to be extroverted, and that there are times for both of those. But for the most part, being an ambivert means that you can move back and forth on this continuum. And here you can see at the very bottom, this continuum I'm talking about. Again, we're looking at extroverts to ambiverts to introverts. And a lot of our students, when they come in, they tend to fit into either introverts or extroverts. It's what's worked for them in K-12. And now they're in a university or a college situation, and they're beginning to see that they're going to need to do this. They're going to need to move back and forth, because as we work with employers, those of you in the 2 years, you know this a lot by maybe through your advisory committees. Those of you in the 4 years, you know what's expected of them as being professional people in your discipline. One of the things that we need to do is we need to be able to get them to turning into ambiverts. So introverts are often exhausted in their workplace because many of their colleagues don't know how to harness the power of introversion. So creating an introvert or an extrovert-friendly learning environment, you need to respect boundaries. And so some of you may have seen this stat before, but it takes up to 23 minutes for a person to regain focus after they've been interrupted. Hence, that's one of the reasons why a lot of people don't want to necessarily come back from the from the time that they had at home during the pandemic when they're working, because they enjoy that time of being uninterrupted, to being able to get tasks done. Brainstorming alone, research shows that if you want to maximize creativity, let people generate ideas themselves before sharing them in the group. Once people start sharing them in the group, you all know what happens. Everybody else starts to go on vacation, and they take time off from having to think about it. Once one person raises their hand, gets the right answer in the classroom, everybody else doesn't have to think about that anymore. And so when we want to have them brainstorm, we want them to think deeper, we really want to make sure that we allow more people to generate ideas. Hence the idea of classroom discussions online, being able for them to be able to get into the mode of having to share first and then see what other people say later, is a very powerful instructional tool. Again, as we look at, and with some of the things that we've learned about work, because one of the things that I do is I go and I work with companies, but I also work with campuses. We really want to shorten or target focus the meetings. So those of you, when you're having that face-to-face class, and it's going to go 4 hours on a Monday night, the chances of students to being able to focus for 4 hours is very limited. So switching up the activities, having a variety of things going on, is going to be extremely important. And again, don't force a certain type of communication. Encourage people to decide how they want to communicate. Do they have their cameras on? Do they have their cameras off? Even if it differs from what you think is important, because sometimes people just need to sort of be a little bit more hidden. They don't want to feel as though they're being exposed by having cameras on or off. So that's something to consider as you go through here. And then provide the option of privacy. Extroverts may love to see everybody all the time, but introverts tend to need privacy. So again, flexible work environments that provide silence and private spaces for introverts, And when I talk about work environment, I talk about classroom situations where they have that. Even if you're in a face-to-face class, are you giving them some quiet, private workspaces before you start to share things in that sort of more lively, interactive space? All right. So online learning, as we know, has done a lot for different things. As we've been able to use a variety of learning management tools to be able to get people to be able to create more of a balance between extroversion and introversion. It also is providing opportunities, as I said before, for those to be able to type responses and share them through the discussion tools in the LMS. And finally, students can post responses. Now we can use text, video, they can ask questions, they can share experiences. We've got a lot of different tools that we're going to be able to use, and using AI is going to be part of the direction of where this is going to go. So with a writing prompt, students are given more time to think about things. Discussions actually work to create ambiverts, especially when you have the expectation that people will start to ask each other questions, that they may be given points by being able to share more information, to dig a little deeper, so that they can also value the responses of their classmates. And the table on the next slide exemplifies some of the ways that we can actually use some of the things that we're doing in your online courses or even within your LMS to be able to do that. And so you'll be able to have access to this slide. I know there's a lot of information here, and it gets to be a little small at this point for you to be able to read all of it. But by using things like the 1-minute paper, online polling, discussion, team projects, even think, pair, share, whether you're doing it in class, face-to-face, or you're doing it online, there are good things for introverts. There are great strategies for extroverts to be able to learn and to grow as you create your ambiverts that way. And so finally, again, I hope that when you use your LMS, you're using a variety of these tools that you're given that way. So that is also going to be a great way for you to be able to provide students with opportunities to dig in there a little bit deeper and to be able to create the ambiverts that you really want them. So the secret is silence. Whenever we want to accelerate quality learning, every time you tend to be interrupted every 3 minutes in class, I know one of the things that becomes extremely important is when you start talking with students and you give them a set of directions, and then you tell them to go ahead and get to work. And I find a lot of the times when I've been observing faculty as a dean or as a teaching expert, one of the things is that within the first few minutes, they interrupt and they start, and everything that has been started takes time to get back into it again when you let them get back into it again. So again, giving clear, explicit directions becomes extremely important. Even if you're doing something online and you're going to give them some private time to work on it, it's really good not to keep interrupting them as they go through here, as you begin to think of more things to share. We think it's helpful, oftentimes it's not. The power of reflection, one of the things that we really need to spend time is allowing students to be able to look at how they've learned. They find places for the information in the brain and how to avoid making previous mistakes. We get students to really begin to look at the reflection of their learning so that we're teaching them to learn how to learn. So the design practices are going to, again, block out interruption-free times, batch the interaction times so that they can share with one another, and have daily check-ins with your students to be able to make sure that they know that you're there, especially in the online environment, that they know that you're there, they know that you're available, and that they can see your presence. One of the talks yesterday was talking about being present in the classroom, and certainly those daily check-ins become extremely important. So what I'd like you to do, and if we had a longer workshop, one of the things that we would do is this. I want you to be able to strike the balance. Think of a course that you teach. And as you think about this course, I want you to think about the activities, assignments, and assessments that are set up for extroverts in your course. On the other end of the spectrum, what are the activities, the assignments, the assessments that are set up for introverts? Feel free to take a picture of this slide if you want to get back to this later, because we won't have time to do it. But when we do face-to-face workshops, or this whole thing is like an hour long, one of the things that we do here is we give people a chance to do this. And then finally, what are the activities, assignments, and assessments that really strike the balance for ambiverts? And one of the things that we really find that are important to faculty is they begin to see the way I designed my course was I'm leaning heavily towards introversion or extroversion, or this is a course that we have spent a little bit of time of in the curriculum, and we really want to create those ambiverts in the middle of this course. So maybe it's a late 100 level course or an early 200 level course. Have we moved our students towards becoming ambiverts when we look at our total curriculum? And so by the time they're done, are your courses in the upper 200 levels or upper 400 levels, are those really much more ambivert sort of weighted courses as we go through there? All right. So let's give you a chance to ask questions in the talk. How have you used a variety of activities and assessments to ensure that your introverts and extroverts needs are being met as you move them to becoming ambiverts? What is something you're intentionally doing in your course design to get people there?
We've got a couple of statements from, about 10 minutes ago that I just want to reemphasize.
Sure.
Someone said they feel like extroverted characteristics have become more important in the age of social media, with people's efforts to be noticed above all the noise. Thought that was interesting.
I suppose it's influencers, because we have a lot of influencers out there. They need to be more extroverted, even though they may secretly be introverted, but they're being socially extroverted.
Okay, an activity for an extrovert could be an open roundtable.
Yep.
For an ambivert, it could be breakout rooms.
Uh-huh. An introvert, again, the introvert side of that thing, drawing this full circle on that is giving them time to think about that ahead of time, so that when they come to the rooms, or they come to a roundtable, they're prepared with information, knowing that up front. Okay, Karen.
Right. Someone else says they're working on a course that has a weekly Zoom meeting. The instructor gives pre-questions for everybody to reflect upon before the meeting starts, so that they can come prepared and feel like contributing.
Exactly.
Teach each other in small groups. Let's see. Introverts, chat rooms, reflections. So they think the pre-questions speak to both extroverts and introverts, because you have it ahead of time.
Yep. Okay. It really prepares that. And would think about that in the workplace. If you were going to go to a faculty meeting, wouldn't it be nice to know what the agenda is and what the questions are that you need to get answered up front, so you came prepared to the meeting? That's running a good meeting. And so I think that's something in the workplace that carries over for that.
Someone else has a system in which students can watch recordings of the live lessons and leave questions for the instructor. They're thinking this might be really good for introverts.
Yeah, absolutely.
In online classes, I have discussions to allow for interaction, but also have a self-reflection assignments that allow students to reflect on their learning. In face-to-face courses, I have students first think through a task on their own and then share in small groups. Someone else said for ambiverts, maybe a facilitated shared slide deck, like little Jamboard or a mural.
These are great
Lots of,
ideas.
there
These
is.
are great ideas, yes. Well, we're going to keep moving on to the second part right now so that we have time for more discussion at the very end. And it ties exactly right into to what this is. And it also, both of these sessions really tie into well into what Hannah Grossman was talking about with this whole idea of sort of that, the feel of learning trauma. Because for some people, if you don't feel like you're going to be successful in the course, that can traumatize you. And a lot of our learners that have come to us in higher education have had 13 years of maybe not a successful pathway as they would have liked. So consequently, I think this becomes really kind of ties in less dramatic, but here are some practical ways that we can take a look at this. One of the things that Karen and I'm going to go back here for a second, the book that's there, Designing Effective Teaching and Significant Learning, is a book that Karen and I and some of our colleagues from Minnesota State wrote together. And we really put together a lot of our information, a lot of our ideas about course design and about teaching and learning as we did that, okay? And so one of the things that becomes extremely important out of this piece is that you can see sort of a book map here. This is the way the chapters all lay out. But during the book and during the course that we have that goes with the book, that we work on, Course Design Institute, with faculty across the country, one of the things that ends up happening is we tie together this sort of feedback triangulation. And first of all, we know that in courses, the feedback and assessment is important. We know that educative assessment is more valuable, or sometimes the most valuable, and we need to tie that back into assessing student learning. This may not make sense to you right now, but we're going to go through these stages and talk about this quickly because, again, this is foundational. I want you to be able to take a look at this. So really, there's two types of assessment when we think about assessing in a course. The first is assessing the student because you're going to give them some sort of an individual grade when you're done. The second is assessing the larger picture of how learning takes place in courses and how that progression in mastering course concepts as a group becomes important to your program or your department outcomes. So we're going to take a look primarily at the second here, but as we go through here, we begin to realize how important it is when you're designing courses to put this assessment together and to be very intentional about what it is. So very quick refresher. Formative and assessment, you know that formative assessments are those lower stake assignments or assessments. They form or guide the direction. They offer feedback to faculty about how the students are progressing, as well as giving feedback and benchmarks to students to measure their learning process. Summative assessments, again, are those that are sort of those final higher stake assessments. They measure the degree a student has mastered the course outcomes. And sometimes assessments can actually be designed to measure more than one outcome through the same assessment. All right. We also have backward-looking and forward-looking assessments. And one of the things that becomes important is you can see an example of the kinds of questions for backward-looking examples of test questions. This is the stuff that AI is great at. This is the stuff that when we worry about students cheating, here's the stuff they can look up. Here's the stuff that if you were a great memorizer as a student, you probably did pretty well at this because you could memorize the facts and the data and this information, all right? And so consequently, we really want to move toward forward-looking assessments. It's discuss how you can use what you read this week. What will be the greatest reward for you as you're preparing for your entry-level position in your career? How would you respond to a customer or colleague that has a concern about the service they received? Those kinds of forward-looking assessments take the material that you're learning and make you think about it in the future so that you can do more with it. So in the book, we talk a little bit about this too. The auditive assessment, that backwards looking assessment, that's the way we've done traditional grading. In fact, I'm working on a presentation right now that's all about drop the grades and motivate with badges. And so we'll take a look at that a little bit, but we won't be able to get into that much on the air. But it's becoming this idea that we really want to move to the educative assessment, where we're going to be able to provide better learning through forward-looking assessment, more self-assessment by the learners themselves, using criteria, standards, rubrics is another key word for that, and giving fidelity feedback, which again is frequent, immediate, discriminating, and respectful. Okay, and those, some of you may recognize are the DFINC principles. Dee actually wrote the forward for our book as we went through here and looked at that. Okay, but we really also want to spend a little time talking about assessment and learning activities, because one of the things that we've done in working with hundreds of faculty over the past 5-6 years, especially during course redesign for the pandemic, is that we really wanted to spend some time looking at this whole idea of, is it a learning activity? Is it an assessment? And frankly, shouldn't assessments also be learning activities if they're done right? That students are going to learn something from doing that assessment, and they're going to take that forward as they progress through your curriculum. So one of the things that we included in the book was, in each of the areas, this one happens to be one of the domains called application, in the taxonomy of significant learning. In the application things, we really started to take a look at what is formal, what's informal, what's formative versus assessment, or summative, that is. And then what are the kinds of assessments and learning activities? Because all of these could be used as an assessment, or they could be used as a learning activity, depending how you decide you're going to design your course. It also takes a look at the learning types to make sure that you're using some active, passive, connecting, reflection. And so as we go through here, again, as I mentioned, all of these, it becomes important to do that. And in our book, we really started to break those down. You can see on the left side of the 3-column table here, you can see the different domains that are in that model, but we also started to take a look at the variety or the triangulation of learning assessments, so that they will give you multiple ways to look at the very same outcome. So here again, think about one of the courses that you've got, that you're teaching, or one that you've designed. Select one of your learning outcomes. And let's take a look at this. How are you triangulating student achievement? Are you doing it through learning activities? Are you using formative assessment? Are you using summative assessment? That's one way that you can begin to use the triangulation of the assessment practice. Now, again, these kinds of things are in the book that we've talked about, and there's some of the most important things that you begin to take a look at as you evaluate not only student learning to determine a grade, but how students progress through your curriculum. Think about those lenses that we just got done doing it. You can also consider in this introvert, extrovert, ambivert as we go through here. So when you pick 3 different learning activities, are you picking something that works for all 3 of them? And then are you picking activities that are reflective, active, passive, connective? In other words, do you have some of each in all of these? And then finally, it lets us break that down into both cognitive domains and affective domains. And that becomes extremely important. So it becomes very intentional the way we want to be able to break that down and take a look at the assessments. You can also break this down by looking at group and peer assessment. These are ways that we can do formative assessments. You can do faculty designed rubric assessment, and you can have students do self-assessment. Again, this triangulation of ways that students begin to use assessment to measure themselves and to be able to progress. We also have in summative assessments, you've got group and peer assessment. Again, you've got the same thing with faculty designed rubrics, and you've got instructor feedback, which is incredibly important and probably leads to the best kind of learning that takes place. So as we look at that, you can use assessment styles for the triangulation. Are you using some informal and formal? Are you using backward and forward looking? Are you using low stakes and high stakes? As you begin to look at your assessment strategies, how are you really looking at the entire learner, the whole learner, and giving them many opportunities? to be able to show you what they can do, what they know, what they've mastered, what they've achieved. And I think that what happens if you are as old as I am, as dirt itself, you can begin to take a look at, there was oftentimes when I went to my university, I wrote a paper, I took a midterm, I took a final. I wouldn't really call that triangulation because it spent a lot of time focusing on the memorization of facts and working in that backward looking kind of thing. I'm going to tell you what I learned about something, and you're going to give me a grade based on that. So this is an opportunity where AI can really help to frame your thinking. This is a great chance for you to ask ChatGPT and other programs like that, other apps like that, to be able to help you design this. And I'll just do a little plug for the next session that Karen and I are doing, which is really going to be, how do you use AI to be able to take a look at learning activities, assessments, course design, and we'll show you the steps, and we'll show you some of the tools that we've used to be able to help faculty and instructional designers look at this in more depth. Because with writing prompts, you don't forget the ways to triangulate because you've included them in the writing prompt itself. Also in the book, we have a rubric for you to be able to take a look at the assessments pieces here. So when you break this down and you really start to take a look at, are you using all of these different types of assessments and using them to triangulate the evaluation of your students' performance, that's going to become extremely important in here. So what I'd like you to do right now is, again in chat, what practices are you currently using to triangulate learning activities and assessments in your courses? And what advantages do you see for students in triangulating assessment?
Okay, we have a comment. I've been an advocate of putting rubrics in front of my students, although I have to admit that I could do a better job with this in my courses.
That's true. Again, we all like to know what we're going to be assessed on, or quote unquote judged by, okay? And we want students to get a chance to see in their professional work, what is it going to be expected in professional career to be able to meet the needs of the employer. And so I think what you begin to do is, how are you going to become more successful? Look at rubrics, look at things, look at the expectations that people are going to have, and rubrics do a good job of laying that out.
Here's another idea. Besides using rubrics, offering options for how to meet objectives, like a paper or slides or a video. You know, that's a great idea too.
That's part of that triangulation, by allowing students to have choice as to how they want to be able to meet the outcome. And sometimes that's okay. That's a great thing for them to do. Or here's a list of 5 things, you need to choose 3 of them to show me. And they're going to be different that way.
I know I used to like to give 3 assignments and say, choose one of these 3, the one that you're, most leading towards. And students like it because they feel like they've got their own little personal learning plan, because they can go with a subject that means more to them,
and they're going to work harder that way too. I think that's the thing, because they chose it. So they're going to do more for it. It's more about them, less about you, as what you want them to do.
As someone just reiterated, choice is a great way to increase engagement. It is.
Well, one of the things that we want to be able to do is share with you, we actually have an online course that you can dive deeper into, and it's really going to go more into that whole designing courses for introverts and extroverts. If you go to iscourses.com and take a look at that, you can subscribe to the course, you can receive a certificate of completion. You can get in touch with Karen and I. Here's our address. So take a photo of this. In fact, I should say, feel free, let's go back for just a moment. Take a photo of this one. We just want to give you some more resources. We want to give you some ideas of ways that you can get into this and dig into this a little bit more. I know conferences aren't always the greatest time because there's always the next session to be able to jump in there. So take a photo there. You can take a photo of this one too, because get in touch with us. We can help you out. Our book is here. There's a discount on the book if you'd like that. It really weighs things out. If any of you are working faculty development on your campuses and you could use this kind of assistance, that'd be great. We're working right now on scheduling some things for summer and next fall. So we're working out ahead a little bit, but we'd be glad to work with you on that. And also, you can get a badge. Thanks for coming to this session. So if you email me, and you can see my email address down below, zala.fashant@insynergy.com, just in the subject line, write engage. I'll send you the badge for participating in this. You can see we got the conference name on it and everything that way. I'll also send you a bonus link that will talk about AI will shake up higher ed. Our college is ready. It's kind of an interesting, I think it came from Inside Higher Ed. And if you haven't read it, it's a good chance to be able to jump in there and read it. But I'll send you that link along with it so that you've got that. All right. Are there any other questions, things like that, that you can, that you'd like to ask? We're just going to leave it open at this point for further questions, further thoughts. You can feel free to unmute if you'd rather talk. That would be great.